This is a Danish English foreign policy briefing on Israel backs US in Venezuela, Europe opposes Greenland claims. Welcome to this special briefing from Danish-InfoNews TV. Today, we unpack the latest high-stake developments in Venezuela, Greenland, and US foreign policy, including Israel's strong support for Washington and the firm pushback from Denmark, Greenland, and the UK. Stay informed with clear, expert analysis on how these global moves affect security, sovereignty, and international law. US operation in Venezuela and global reactions, with implications for Greenland. First, Israel as co-US supporter, strong endorsement of American action. Israel emerged as one of the strongest and clearest international supporters of the United States following the US-led operation in Venezuela that resulted in the capture of President Nicolas Maduro. Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar publicly praised the operation, describing the United States under President Trump as the leader of the free world. Israel framed the intervention as a historic act in support of democratic values and regional stability. According to Sa'ar, Maduro led an illegal tyranny intertwined with drugs and terror networks. Israel welcomed his removal and expressed hope for a democratic transition in Venezuela and the establishment of friendly bilateral relations. The statement emphasized that the Venezuelan people deserve to exercise their democratic rights. South America deserves a future free from the axis of terror and drugs. Israel's reaction places it firmly in alignment with the Trump administration's assertive interpretation of US global leadership and willingness to use force to reshape regional orders. Second, Denmark and Greenland reinforced rejection and heightened alarm. Danish government position reinforced and escalated. Denmark has not merely rejected US rhetoric regarding Greenland, but has progressively reinforced and escalated its response as President Trump's statements intensified in tone and frequency. Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen has delivered multiple unequivocal statements stressing that Greenland's status is non-negotiable. It gives absolutely no meaning to talk about the United States needing to take over Greenland. The US has no right to annex any of the three nations in the Danish kingdom. She warned that repeated American statements constitute threats against a historically close ally. Frederiksen has emphasized that Greenland is part of NATO and therefore protected by the alliance's collective security guarantee, directly countering any narrative that Denmark is unable or unwilling to uphold security responsibilities in the Arctic. Danish officials and analysts increasingly view Trump's rhetoric as a pressure strategy rather than a casual provocation designed to test Allied resolve and normalize the idea of US primacy over Greenland. Greenlandic response: firm, public, and popular. Greenland's political leadership has likewise hardened its stance. Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen responded to Trump's most recent remarks with unusual bluntness. That's enough now. He dismissed the notion of US control over Greenland as a fantasy. Public sentiment in Greenland mirrors this firmness. Trump's comments and symbolic gestures, such as images of Greenland wrapped in the US flag, shared by figures close to the administration, have triggered widespread public backlash. A viral counter-image showing Greenland covered by its own national flag spread rapidly across Greenlandic and Danish social media, becoming a symbol of resistance to external pressure. While Danish and Greenlandic leaders consistently stress that Greenland is not Venezuela, the US intervention in Caracas has amplified concerns that Washington is prepared to bypass diplomacy, international law, and allied sensitivities when strategic interests are invoked. Third, United Kingdom. Clear support for Danish and Greenlandic sovereignty. UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer took an unusual direct stance in response to Trump's comments on Greenland. In an interview with the BBC, Starmer stated unequivocally, "Only Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark should decide the future of Greenland." When asked if he would tell President Trump, "Hands off Greenland," Starmer replied simply, "Yes." Starmer emphasized that Denmark is both a close European ally and a NATO ally, and that Greenland's future must be decided only by Denmark and Greenland themselves. In Venezuela, however, Starmer's tone was more cautious. While he stressed that the US must justify its actions and that the UK would always defend international law, he avoided explicitly stating whether the operation was legal. He acknowledged that Maduro was an illegitimate leader and called for a rapid, peaceful transition to democracy. This contrast highlights the UK's balancing act, strong defense of Allied sovereignty in Europe and Arctic, paired with strategic ambiguity regarding US actions in Latin America. Fourth, broader international and global responses. Now, to some European reactions. Germany stated that Greenland belongs to Denmark and indicated NATO could discuss strengthening protections if necessary. Norway and Sweden publicly supported Denmark, stressing respect for sovereignty and international norms. Russia and China. China condemns the US operation in Venezuela and called for the immediate release of Maduro and his wife, warning against violations of sovereignty. Russia has issued no formal endorsement but is closely monitoring developments, particularly given concerns about President and US dominance in the Western Hemisphere. Latin America. Colombia rejects Trump's threats of a possible US operation, with President Gustavo Petro accusing Trump of defamation and warning against imperial rhetoric. Regional governments fear refugee flows and instability following the intervention. United Nations. The UN Security Council is expected to discuss this US operation. Several governments and legal experts have questioned its compatibility with international law, warning of a slide toward what some have described as international anarchy. Fifth, strategic assessment. The US intervention in Venezuela and President Trump's rhetoric on Greenland are increasingly viewed as part of a single strategic worldview. A revived Monroe Doctrine reframed as US dominance over the Western Hemisphere. A willingness to use military power, coercive ambiguity, and time pressure as strategic tools. Israel has embraced this approach as decisive leadership. Denmark and Greenland see it as an existential challenge to sovereignty. The UK and Europe have drawn a clear red line around Greenland, while remaining cautious on Venezuela. Globally, reactions are fragmented, raising concerns about precedent, escalation, and the erosion of international norms. The situation remains fluid, with Greenland now firmly embedded in a wider geopolitical context rather than treated solely as an allied or diplomatic issue. Thank you for joining this special briefing from Danish-InfoNews TV. For in-depth coverage, expert insights, and real-time updates on global affairs, subscribe and never miss a critical story that matters to Denmark, Greenland, and the world.